You have been lied to about kindness, and that lie is destroying your chances of ever being truly respected and desired by the men you want most. While you have been taught that being endlessly giving and accommodating makes you a good woman, Sigmund Freud discovered something that will shock you. Your excessive kindness is actually a psychological symptom that signals deep, unconscious wounds and emotional immaturity to every man you meet. The cruel truth is that the nicer you are, the less he respects you. Not because men are evil, but because your kindness is coming from all the wrong psychological places. In the next few minutes, I am going to reveal the 5 unconscious patterns that transform your genuine caring nature into a respect-killing behavior that pushes away the very love you are trying so hard to earn. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why your kindness has been working against you and what you need to do instead to finally command the respect and adoration you deserve. Deep in your unconscious mind lies a wounded little girl who learned that love comes with conditions. Freud discovered that our earliest experiences with caregivers create templates for all future relationships. If you received attention only when you were helpful, quiet, or giving, your psyche internalized a dangerous equation. Love equals sacrifice became your unconscious programming. This childhood wound now drives you to give endlessly to men who take without reciprocating. Your excessive kindness is not actually kindness at all, but a compulsive behavior rooted in fear. The unconscious mind operates on the principle that past survival strategies must be repeated to ensure safety. You unconsciously believe that if you stop being overly accommodating, you will be abandoned just like that little girl feared. This creates a cycle where you attract men who exploit your giving nature, because your energy signals desperation rather than genuine care. Your kindness becomes a drug you use to numb the terror of potential rejection. The cruel irony is that this unconscious pattern creates the very abandonment you fear most. Men instinctively sense when kindness comes from weakness rather than strength. Freud taught us that we repeat our traumas until we become conscious of them. When you give from a place of unconscious neediness, you invite disrespect because you are essentially communicating that you do not value yourself. Your kindness becomes a prison that keeps you trapped in relationships where you are undervalued and taken for granted. Freud identified reaction formation as one of the most deceptive defense mechanisms where we express the opposite of what we truly feel. Your overwhelming kindness may actually be a psychological shield protecting you from acknowledging your own anger, disappointment, and resentment toward men. Deep down, you might feel furious about being taken advantage of, but your psyche finds this rage too threatening to face. Instead of confronting these uncomfortable emotions, you unconsciously amplify your niceness as a way to prove to yourself that you are not angry. This defense mechanism becomes particularly dangerous in romantic relationships because it prevents authentic connection. When you are being excessively kind to avoid feeling your real emotions, you are essentially living a lie. Men can sense this inauthenticity even if they cannot name it, and it makes them lose respect for you. You're overcompensated. Sweetness feels fake because it is covering up your genuine feelings. Freud believed that repressed emotions always find a way to surface, and yours leak out through passive-aggressive behaviors, martyrdom, or sudden explosive outbursts that confuse everyone, including yourself. The man in your life unconsciously picks up on the incongruence between your actions and your true emotional state. He senses that your kindness is not coming from a place of genuine love, but from psychological defense. This creates an uncomfortable dynamic where he feels like he is interacting with a performance rather than a real person. Your reaction formation. Kindness actually pushes him away because authentic intimacy requires emotional honesty. When you hide behind excessive niceness, you rob both yourself and him of the possibility for genuine connection and mutual respect. Freud explained that we are born governed by the pleasure principle, seeking immediate gratification and avoiding pain at all costs. Your excessive kindness often serves this primitive psychological function by helping you avoid the discomfort of conflict, rejection, or difficult conversations. When you automatically say yes to everything he wants, you are choosing the immediate pleasure of his approval over the reality of what healthy relationships actually require. This psychological immaturity keeps you trapped in fantasy rather than dealing with relationship reality. The reality principle demands that we face uncomfortable truths and delay gratification for long-term benefit. Mature love requires boundaries, disagreements, and sometimes saying no to preserve your own well-being and the health of the relationship. When you operate purely from the pleasure principle through excessive agreeableness, you avoid the necessary work of building genuine respect and intimacy. You choose the immediate hit of his temporary happiness over the harder path of establishing mutual respect through authentic communication. Men unconsciously lose respect for women who cannot handle relationship reality because it signals emotional immaturity. A woman who cannot bear the temporary discomfort of his displeasure appears weak and unreliable as a long-term partner. Freud understood that psychological growth requires moving beyond the pleasure principle toward reality testing. When you always choose his comfort over honest communication, you remain stuck in an infantile psychological state that repels mature masculine energy. Your avoidance of relationship reality through excessive kindness actually creates the very rejection and abandonment you are trying to prevent. Freud discovered that we unconsciously transfer feelings and patterns from our earliest relationships onto new people in our lives. If you had a father who was emotionally distant, critical, or withholding of love, you may unconsciously recreate this dynamic with every man you date. Your excessive kindness becomes a desperate attempt to finally earn the approval and validation you never received from your first male authority figure. You are not actually relating to the man in front of you, but to the ghost of your father through him. This transference creates a power imbalance that destroys mutual respect because you are unconsciously placing him in a parental role. When you bend over backwards to please him, you are essentially begging for daddy's love rather than engaging as an equal adult woman. Men can sense when they are being treated like a father figure rather than a romantic partner, and it kills their attraction. And respect for you? Your kindness becomes childlike and needy rather than the generous expression of a confident woman. The unconscious parent-child dynamic you create through transference makes healthy adult love impossible. You cannot have a partnership with someone you are unconsciously trying to win over like a little girl seeking approval. Freud taught that awareness of transference is the key to breaking these destructive patterns. Until you recognize that your excessive people-pleasing is really an attempt to heal old wounds with your father, you will continue attracting men who treat you like the dismissive parent you are unconsciously seeking. Your kindness becomes a symptom of unresolved daddy issues rather than genuine care. Freud's most controversial theory proposed that humans possess a death drive, an unconscious urge toward self-destruction that competes with our life instincts. Your excessive kindness may actually be this death drive in disguise, slowly eroding your sense of self until nothing authentic remains. When you consistently prioritize his needs over your own, you are unconsciously destroying the very essence of who you are. This psychological suicide happens gradually as you sacrifice your desires, opinions, and boundaries on the altar of his comfort. The death drive manifests in relationships through behaviors that seem loving, but actually undermine your own happiness and growth. Every time you silence your voice to keep him happy, you kill a little piece of your authentic self. Every boundary you fail to set, every yes you give when you mean no, feeds this unconscious urge toward self-annihilation. Freud understood that this drive toward destruction often masquerades as virtue, making it particularly dangerous because you feel righteous while destroying yourself. Men unconsciously sense when a woman is engaged in psychological self-destruction, and it repels them at a primal level. The death drive creates an energy of desperation and neediness that feels suffocating rather than loving. When you are unconsciously destroying yourself through excessive giving, you become a psychological vampire who drains his energy rather than adding to his life. Your kindness becomes toxic because it carries the energy of self-destruction, and healthy masculine energy naturally rejects anything that threatens life and growth. He loses respect because he can feel you disappearing into your own self-imposed martyrdom. Freud's Oedipal complex reveals how early competitive dynamics with our same-sex parent shape our adult romantic patterns. As a little girl, you may have unconsciously competed with your mother for your father's attention and love. If this complex remains unresolved, you carry this competitive energy into your adult relationships, unconsciously trying to prove you are the perfect woman by being nicer than all the other women in his life. Your excessive kindness becomes a weapon in an unconscious war you are still fighting against every female who might threaten your position. This Oedipal competition drives you to be overly accommodating because you believe being the nicest will make you irreplaceable. You unconsciously monitor how he treats his mother, ex-girlfriends, female friends, and colleagues, then try to outdo them all through excessive generosity and selflessness. Your kindness becomes performative rather than authentic because it is motivated by the need to win rather than genuine care. You are not loving him. You are trying to defeat other women by being impossibly sweet and giving. Men lose respect for this type of kindness because they can sense the underlying competition and insecurity driving your behavior. When your niceness comes from a place of trying to prove you are better than other women, it feels manipulative rather than loving. Freud believed that unresolved Oedipal issues create adults who remain psychologically stuck in childhood patterns. Your excessive kindness reveals that you are still that little girl, trying to win daddy's love by being better than mommy. This psychological immaturity repels mature masculine energy because he needs a woman, not a competitor disguised as a people pleaser. Freud understood that we all possess a shadow, self-containing the parts of our personality we deem unacceptable or threatening. Your excessive kindness often serves as a repressive mechanism to keep your powerful, assertive, and potentially difficult aspects buried in your unconscious. You have likely been conditioned to believe that expressing anger, setting firm boundaries, or prioritizing your needs makes you a bad woman. This shadow repression forces you to present only your sweet, accommodating side while denying the full spectrum of your feminine power. The energy required to constantly repress your shadow self creates psychological exhaustion and inauthenticity that men can intuitively detect. When you refuse to acknowledge your capacity for anger, selfishness, or assertiveness, you become a one-dimensional character rather than a fully realized woman. Your kindness feels hollow because it is not balanced by the strength and fire that exists in your shadow. Freud taught that psychological health requires integrating all aspects of the self, including the parts we find uncomfortable or socially unacceptable. Men respect women who own their full range of emotions and behaviors because it signals psychological maturity and authenticity. When you repress your shadow through excessive niceness, you appear weak and incomplete rather than genuinely kind. Your refusal to acknowledge your darker impulses makes you unpredictable because repressed energy always finds a way to surface. Through unconscious behaviors, He loses respect because he senses you are lying to yourself and therefore cannot be trusted to be honest with him. True kindness can only emerge from a woman who has faced and integrated her shadow self. Freud's psychosexual development theory identifies the oral stage as our first experience of pleasure and dependency through feeding and nurturing. When development becomes fixated at this stage, adults remain psychologically stuck, seeking validation through giving and receiving care, rather than mature forms of intimacy. Your excessive kindness may be a symptom of oral fixation, where you unconsciously believe that feeding others emotionally will guarantee they will never leave you. You become the perpetual mother figure, offering endless emotional nourishment to men who take without reciprocating. This oral fixation creates a dynamic where you derive your sense of worth from how much you can give rather than what you can receive. Like a baby who believes survival depends on keeping the caregiver happy, you unconsciously fear that stopping your excessive generosity will result in abandonment. Your kindness becomes compulsive rather than chosen because your psyche remains trapped in the infant stage where giving equals survival. You have never learned to receive love and validation in mature, reciprocal ways. Men lose respect for oral, fixated kindness because it feels needy and infantile rather than nurturing and strong. When your giving comes from a place of psychological dependency rather than abundance, it creates an energy of desperation that repels masculine energy. Freud understood that healthy adult relationships require moving beyond oral dependency toward genital stage maturity, where pleasure is mutual and reciprocal. Your excessive kindness reveals that you are still psychologically stuck in the nursing stage, seeking security through feeding others rather than engaging in equal partnership. This immaturity makes you appear more like a mother than a lover. Freud's structural model reveals how the superego, your internalized moral authority, can become a tyrannical force that demands impossible standards of goodness. Your excessive kindness may be driven by a hyperactive superego that has absorbed toxic messages about what makes a woman worthy of love. Society, family, and religious conditioning may have programmed your superego to believe that your value depends entirely on how much you sacrifice for others. This internalized voice constantly judges you as selfish whenever you consider your own needs, trapping you in endless cycles of people-pleasing. The superego trap makes you believe that any assertion of your desires or boundaries makes you a bad person, deserving of punishment and abandonment. Your kindness becomes a desperate attempt to satisfy this internal critic that can never be appeased because it demands complete self-erasure. Every time you say no or prioritize yourself, the superego attacks with guilt and shame, forcing you back into excessive giving patterns. This creates a psychological prison where you are both the guard and the prisoner, policing your own behavior according to impossible standards of feminine virtue. Men unconsciously sense when your kindness comes from superego oppression, rather than authentic choice, and it repels them because it feels heavy and burdened. When you are being kind to avoid internal punishment rather than from genuine care, your energy carries the weight of psychological slavery. Freud understood that psychological health requires balancing the superego with the ego and id, allowing for realistic moral standards that include self-care. Your excessive kindness reveals a superego that has become a dictator, making you appear weak and self-abandoning rather than virtuous. Healthy masculine energy cannot respect a woman who has become a slave to her own internal oppressor. Freud understood that libido, your life force and sexual energy must flow freely to create psychological health and authentic attraction. When You channel all your libidinal energy into caretaking and people-pleasing. You misdirect this powerful force away from its natural expression through confidence, creativity, and magnetic femininity. Your excessive kindness becomes a way of dissipating sexual energy that should be creating attraction and desire. Instead of radiating the compelling energy that draws men toward you, you leak your power through endless giving and accommodating. This misdirection of libidinal energy creates a woman who appears sexually and energetically depleted rather than vibrant and alluring. Men are unconsciously drawn to women who contain and direct their sexual energy with purpose and self-awareness, not those who scatter it through compulsive caretaking behaviors. When you use your life force to constantly serve others, you have no energy left for the magnetic presence that creates genuine attraction and respect. Your kindness becomes a substitute for authentic feminine power, leaving you exhausted and invisible to masculine desire. The tragic result of libidinal misdirection is that you become increasingly unattractive as you become increasingly giving, creating the opposite effect of what you intend. Freud taught that sexual energy is the foundation of all creative and attractive force in human beings. When you redirect this energy into excessive kindness, you essentially castrate your own feminine power and become a servant rather than a goddess. Men cannot respect what does not respect itself, and your misdirected libido signals that you have abandoned your own sexual sovereignty. True kindness emerges from a woman who honors her sexual energy first, then chooses to share from her overflow rather than her depletion. Freud showed us that our unconscious patterns determine our destiny in love, and your excessive kindness may be the very thing destroying the respect and attraction you desperately seek. When kindness becomes a prison rather than a choice, when giving becomes compulsive rather than generous, you transform from a powerful woman into a psychological servant who repels the very love she tries to attract. The path to genuine respect lies not in giving more, but in understanding why you give. From depletion rather than abundance, why you choose self-sacrifice over self-honor, and why you mistake people-pleasing for love. Are you ready to face the unconscious patterns that keep you trapped in relationships where your kindness is taken for granted? Or will you continue to wonder why being so good to men never brings you the love and respect you deserve? If this video opened your eyes to the psychological patterns sabotaging your relationships, hit that subscribe button, because we are just getting started on this journey of feminine awakening and psychological truth.